It feels good to be back after a few busy days to bring you all my review of the past week of Overwatch League Playoffs action. Unlike week 1, it's fair to say that the second week of the playoffs was perhaps a little underwhelming, given how one-sided most of the matches were. We still got to see a fantastic series midway through, and in the end, I think it's clear that we have the two strongest teams heading into the grand final in Philadelphia in a few days' time. Of course, let's start from Thursday, as we return to the losers bracket for a second round, as the Atlanta Reign played the Hangzhou Spark, and the LA Gladiators faced off against the San Francisco Shock. Regarding the first matchup, Atlanta came in as strong favourites as they just edged out the Shock in their winners quarterfinal before being beaten in a competitive series against the New York Excelsior. Hangzhou, meanwhile, on paper, didn't seem to have been tested nearly as much, with a narrow loss initially to the Gladiators before defeating Seoul convincingly in the opening round of the losers bracket. Having had another week of preparation and practice with this meta, people were interested to see how the teams were adapting to it and improving, with some indications at the end of week 1 that Bastion was receiving an increasing pick priority. The opening map on Busan, however, saw the team stick to a familiar Doomfist Reaper double shield setup that we saw last week, and it was a Spark who came out on top early. In what was arguably the most dominant map of this series, it was ominous that when it came down to the fundamentals of their engagement and ultimate usage, Hangzhou were far superior to Atlanta. Bazzi was absolutely rolling on the Doomfist, with his pressure allowing Godspeed to get a lot of value out on his flanks on the Reaper. At the same time, the Reign just looked a little fragmented, with Baby Bay and Ursa often getting picked on poorly timed and positioned flanks of their own, which saw the neutral fights often go in the favour of the Spark. When it came to the usage of their ultimates, unlike last week when I thought it was a particular strength of theirs, the Reign seemed to rush their use and making their engagements very sloppy, whilst Hangzhou were brilliant in being patient and using their ultimates late in order to give themselves the advantage and swing the teamfights back into their control. The opening map went quickly 2-0 in rounds for Spark, giving them the 1-0 map lead in the series. From here on, they did not look back, even if the match itself became much closer, with second rounds of attacks occurring on each occasion. At this point we saw more use of the Bastion comps with either a Mei or a Pharah, especially once set up and with ultimates online, really gave each side a lot of momentum, allowing them to finish the maps in their first attacks. The main issue for Atlanta, however, was that it just appeared that at every crucial moment, it was a member of the Spark who came up with the critical play. For instance, whilst both Rio and Gator looked good throughout, it was clear that the man in pink was getting much better value out of his accretion stunts. The turning point that compounded this series, in my opinion, was Hangzhou's second attack on Numbani. Both teams had completed the map in overtime, giving them second round of attack, of only 1 minute in the time bank. After capturing point A, after Godspeed melted the Reign through an amplification barrier from IDK, the Spark set themselves up and impressively rolled through the rest of the map. Whilst they remained composed and calm with their ultimate usage, Atlanta became panicked and never really got any value out of their own, resulting in their opponents completing the map for a second time. That sort of statement can have a major impact on a team and match. I think that in this case it did. From here on, even though they were able to get some good things going, Atlanta just never really looked like they gained the upper hand over Hangzhou, and were the underdogs going into every crucial overtime fight. The Spark went on to emphasise this by winning map 2 6-4, and then map 3 on Anubis 3-2, and lastly on map 4 Gibraltar 4-3, with their patient style helping to stall the Reign as they continued to press their advantage. This meant that the series ended 4-0, sending Atlanta disappointingly home after what had been a fantastic end to the season. In many ways, the second match on Thursday actually played out quite similarly to the first one, as the LA Gladiators went up against the San Francisco Shock. The Gladiators were coming in from the winners bracket after just seeing themselves past Hangzhou, while putting up a decent fight in their loss to the Vancouver Titans. San Francisco, however, came in as strong favourites after heartbreakingly losing their opening playoff match to Atlanta, and now look to sweep through the losers bracket with their dominant 4 of London, a clear statement of that intent. Once again, the opening map on Busan was one of the less competitive. The Shock took both rounds to win the first map of the series, with Architect and Sinatra just having the greater impact of a DPS position. Whilst this series would play out in parallel to the one that came before it, with the competition being quite close at times through to its completion, the major contrast was in the approach taken. The Gladiators, as they had been all season, were a little more passive, and when they got the opening pick through hydration to Chaos Shorefall, they were normally quite good at being able to capitalise on it, and gather a bit of momentum, which at times stalled the Shock, or indeed helped them to progress further through the maps. The issue, however, was that they struggled severely to deal with the intensity and ruthlessness of San Francisco's engagements. This shouldn't have been a major surprise, as the Shock have been known for their aggression all season, but at times they just looked unrelenting, especially late on in their defences on map 2 and 4, on Kings Row and Rialto, to really turn the screw and halt any momentum that just looked like it might be building for the LA side. As usual as well, the Shock were clinical in the clutch moments, with Troy Hyobin having a really strong series on the Sigma, as they confidently wrapped up the series 4-0, sending them to the losers bracket semi against Hangzhou, whilst eliminating the Gladiators, who perhaps should be questioned on the decision to have Hydration play most of this match on Sigma, when Decay struggled clearly in the Doomfist 1v1 against Sinatra. The biggest match on paper, however, kicked us off on Friday as the Vancouver Titans took on the New York Excelsior in the winners' final, with the victor booking their place in Philadelphia for the grand finals. Having had back-to-back 4-0 series, the hope was this one would deliver upon expectations, and thankfully it did. Vancouver had made it here by defeating the Seoul Dynasty and the LA Gladiators in their opening 2 rounds of the winners' bracket, whilst New York had bested the London Spitfire and then the Atlanta Reign, with both squads winning rather convincingly and on paper seeming to be the 2 strongest sides in the playoffs. It was the Titans, however, who gained the advantage early on, as they dominated the control map Li Jiang behind their playoffs MVP and Rookie of the Year Haxel, who continued his reign of terror on Doomfist. He just seemed to be everywhere and meant everything to his team's progression, but the Excelsior just couldn't find a way to take him down, with Libero, despite having a decent performance, simply being unable to have as much of an impact on the hero by comparison. The question now heading into King's Row would be how New York responded to this great start from Vancouver. They attacked first and started to build momentum, with Libero managing to get some early picks, all the while Sabiolbi caused havoc on the flank, with Meko getting greater value out of his rock accretions. The Excelsior impressively pushed on to complete the map with just under 2 minutes of time bank remaining. In their reply, the Titans found themselves getting caught up a bit, as they too often relied on Haxel to get the opening pick, to allow Xiaominsu to have a major impact, but with efficient ultimate usage, New York managed to lessen his impact, and gain a little bit of the initiative, which allowed them to take Vancouver's attack into overtime, and subsequently winning it entirely on the back of a great engagement set up by an Arissa Holt to level the series at 1-1. Now heading on to Anubis, this momentum continued to be in the Excelsior's favour, with their strength and compositional flexibility really starting to pay off. On both their offense and defense, they brilliantly set up with a Bastion and Mei, rather than trying to challenge Haxel too often in the Doomfist 1v1. This worked a treat as they heavily stalled Vancouver's attack, but only completed the map in overtime, before utilising the strength of Death Blossom and Blizzard to steamroll their way through to their own attack to finish with 4 minutes 20 on the time bank. At this point, the map seemed to be inevitable, and sure enough, New York got the job done, capping point 8 to now find themselves 2-1 up in the series. The following 2 maps though, on first Gibraltar and then Busan, saw the pendulum swing in the opposite direction, as Vancouver typically bounced back with a bang. Haxel got back into his groove as the Titans punished poor team coordination from the Excelsior and increasingly some odd ultimates from Sabiolbi to blitz through Gibraltar on their attack. And New York didn't get completely held up, and often through great early picks from Libero, who had quite a strong series against Haxel, found some success and progress, but in the end it wasn't enough, as they were denied from completing the map, and after being destroyed on Busan, what had been a 2-1 Excelsior lead was now 3-2 in Vancouver's favour. Match point now loomed, and the teams took to Numbani. But in spite of the pressure, the Excelsior responded fantastically, getting amazing value out of a Bastion Farah attack composition that seemed to catch the Titans off guard, and snowballed their way through to the first 2 sections of the map. They eventually returned to a Doom Reaper setup, but found themselves with an ultimate advantage they used effectively to wipe their opposition's final defence, and complete the map with over 2 minutes remaining. By contrast, Vancouver took longer to get going, taking 3 minutes just to cap point 8, before Haxel and Xiaominsu found the kills they needed after using their ultimates to capture the point. But even though they'd had this early advantage, New York came off the rails for the rest of their defence, as the coordination disappeared and they just wasted their ultimates. Mistakes that were brutally punished as the Titans pushed the payload through with little delay to in fact complete the map almost 30 seconds quicker. Their backs may have been against the wall at this point, but it was at this time that Sabiolbi and Libero really came in clutch for New York, and just after capturing the first point, they brilliantly wiped Vancouver time and time again through excellent ult usage to extraordinarily complete the map for a second time round and place all the pressure back onto the Titans. A pressure they couldn't answer to, as they were full held, as the series was tied once more at 3-3. They battled so well and hard throughout, with each of the players putting on a very admirable and impressive performance. But the threat of Haxel inevitably proved too much to handle, as he unlocked the rest of his team's offense, allowing for others like Xiaominsu and Jano to be very effective. The Titans completed map 7 on Dorado in overtime, before then holding a fading New York side to midway through the second section, to win the series in my opinion deservedly, 4-3, and send them through to the grand finals, whilst the battle-worn New York had to await their opponent in the losers' final. All that was now left to determine was who would be our other finalists from the losers' bracket. The losers' semi and losers' final involving the Hangzhou Spark, New York Excelsior, and San Francisco Shock took place over the weekend, but despite us enjoying a fantastic winners' final on Friday, it temporarily broke the one-sided cycle, before Overwatch returned again in these last 2 fixtures of week 2. The reason for this was one team, the Shock. They'd been rolling through the losers' bracket in a dominant fashion, clearly looking to avenge their early round loss to Atlanta, but they probably should have won. It wasn't as if their opponents played poorly. The Spark were very competitive across a number of the maps they played, with their reactionary playstyle alongside the effectiveness of Bazzi's Doomfist helping them to periods of success. The issue, however, was that San Francisco were raising their game whenever they came under pressure, always getting the maximum value out of their ultimates, finding ways to win the crucial teamfights they needed, all the while ruthlessly punishing and capitalising upon any mistake from the Spark, such as the general underperformance from Rhea on the Sigma. Sinatra, alongside his fellow DPS players, was able to keep up an intense pressure throughout, and Smurf and Choi Hyobin played very well from the tank position, and whilst in these playoffs their importance may have been a little more understated, Moth, but in particular Violet, showed up in this series with excellent support play, with their ultimates both offensively and defensively being very efficiently used. The 4-0 win eliminated Hangzhou and set them up in the losers' final against New York, and whilst people hoped for a close affair, it proved to be anything but. The Shock were going to complete their Golden Losers bracket run without dropping a single map, and whilst they once again looked clinical and aggressive, it just appeared that the Excelsior were perhaps a little bit drained from their narrow and drawn out loss to Vancouver a couple of days prior. Again, it wasn't as if this was a complete stomp, as the first few maps were once again closely contested. When it came down to the overtime, or must-win teamfights when the map was on the line, on every occasion it was San Francisco who ended up the ones to clutch it out and come out on top, either through a starting pick from Sinatra, or just a more impactful use of their ultimates. Yet again the contest ended 4-0, seeing the Shock advance, and whilst it may have been an unfortunate end, it cannot be denied that New York still enjoyed a great season, proving many doubters, including myself, very wrong by overcoming the odds and turning up to perform throughout these playoffs, only missing out on the grand finals by a very, very small margin. The results of these matches have now confirmed the two teams that will face off against one another in Philadelphia for the grand finals, the Vancouver Titans and the San Francisco Shock, who have clearly been the most consistently dominant and strong sides all season, and at least in my opinion, completely deserve their spots in the grand final, which I hope should be a brilliant affair and add to this fantastic rivalry that's developed over the past year. I'll be previewing this matchup in the coming days before unveiling my prediction before the match begins at the weekend, because everyone loves to hear my completely accurate predictions that have been going very well so far in these playoffs. But for now, I'm just going to end my video here, and I'd like to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed and don't want to miss out on my preview and predictions over the next few days, then please like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter for this continuing competitive Overwatch coverage and content. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.